Hey y'all, what's up? Welcome to Roots Refuge Farm. My name is Jess. If you're new here, I'm so glad you are here today in my office with me to chat about one of my most favorite topics to talk about, and that is seeds. If you're not new here, welcome back. You probably already know, if you've been around here for very long, I can get a little long-winded when it comes to this particular topic. So make yourself a cup of tea, a cup of coffee, or if you prefer, put your headphones in and do the dishes. Or not, that's also okay. This is going to be a little bit of a long format video where I convey a lot of information to you. Today is going to be kind of introductory on these things. Maybe you'll learn something even if you've been gardening for a long time. However, I do want to invite you, if you are an experienced gardener, if you have been seed starting, even just for a couple of years, please, if you have any tips by the end of this video that I didn't cover, throw them down in the comments below. You get to be a teacher here in this comment section, and I think that when we all work together in community, we can really empower people who are coming into gardening by sharing our knowledge freely with them. So it is the time of year to shop for seeds for your garden. I love to talk about growing food. It is one of the greatest passions of my life. When I found the garden, I found myself as a gardener in such a powerful way. I love it so much, and I love starting my garden from seed. Because I do talk so much about this, when this time of year rolls around, I have so many messages from people asking a lot of the same questions over and over. And I've done lots of content in the past talking about seed starting. I have multiple videos coming up here in the next couple weeks talking about my favorite varieties, my garden plan this year, the things that I love to grow, and just information that may be of use to you while you're making your garden plan. But I always like to do a video like this, answering some of these frequently asked questions, specifically for people who maybe don't have a whole lot of garden experience, or people who have grown lots and lots of gardens from started plants, but they're making the foray into seeds for the first time. It can be a little bit overwhelming to start your garden from seed. There's a little bit of a learning curve, but thankfully it is a learning curve that I feel like the risk is not great. I mean, if you start seeds and something goes wrong and they fail, you can always start more. And that's one of the big reasons I love seed starting, because it can be much more economical, and the margin for error isn't as great because you can always start over. And I think that that takes a lot of the nervousness out of gardening for new gardeners, and I can totally appreciate something that does that. Before we dive into the where to buy, what to buy, how much to buy, all of that, I want to make a quick case for starting the garden from seed. Many people think that this is so hard they can't do it, and they immediately dismiss it. Many people get overwhelmed when you start talking about 6 weeks before transplant, 8 weeks before transplant. You start talking about all the materials you need and all of that stuff. I want to encourage you that starting from seed has so many benefits, and though, as I mentioned, there is a little bit of a learning curve, you can totally do this. This is not beyond you. I have talked to so many people, countless, literally thousands of people who have taken the dive and started their garden from seed. Brand new gardeners that have never grown anything starting a garden from seed. You can do this. My 8-year-old has successfully started many seeds. Of course, he started with my guidance, but now he can do it on his own, which is amazing. So I would say the top benefit for me of starting from seed is the financial aspect. One started tomato plant can range anywhere between $3 and $6, and whenever you buy a package of seeds for $3 or $6, you potentially have 30 to 50 tomato plants in there. Obviously, you're going to save a lot of money if you do it this way. I would say that's probably the number one, but equally so, I love starting from seed because of the variety that it affords. Whenever you go into a big box store or even a local nursery to buy started plants, you're going to be really limited on the options that you have. They're going to have a handful of their best-selling heirlooms, they're going to have a handful of their best-selling hybrids, and that's pretty much going to be it. The reason why is those big box stores, they have to keep in mind their bottom line. They can't start 100 different types of tomatoes to give you 100 options to choose from, because they can't risk those plants getting too big and root bound or dying. I mean, obviously seed starting, when you're selling live plants, you've got a pretty small window of their viability as a solid product. They limit the options to what they know will sell so that they can make the most money. Understandable, this is a business. But as a home gardener, if you go look at any heirloom seed company, if you look at a seed catalog, if you get on the Seed Savers Exchange, you'll see that there are countless variety. Now, when I started gardening, I started on started plants, and I was working so hard to try to save my yellow squash plants from squash bugs, or to try to grow tomatoes that look just like the tomatoes at the grocery store. And I found myself pretty discouraged come June and July. Of course, those foods were in season because everyone else, including farmers, were growing them. And I was toiling in my garden, and I would go to the store and see the very same food I was working so hard for, you know, less than $1 a pound. And it made me question, what exactly is the point of doing this? Why am I working so hard for something that is of so little value? Now, the argument can be made that food that grows in your yard is much more nutritious and overall better for the environment. That's very, very much true. You don't have to pay tax on it. You don't have to pay for it other than the investment that you made in your garden. And ultimately, as you grow it, you're growing as a gardener and growing as skills, which is giving you power and resilience and sustainability. So even if all you grew was basic varieties, from now until the end of time, I would still tell you to garden. But if you know that you're the kind of person that struggles when things get hard with not giving up, like I kind of deal with that a little bit myself. I didn't grow up gardening. This was a new thing for me. So I realized that it was a huge motivation to me to grow things that if I did not stick with it, I would otherwise never get to experience them. I would never get to taste them. I would never get to see them, to cook with them. And I found that that was a massive motivator. I love starting my garden from seed because I can then fill my garden with beautiful things that taste amazing and that are unique experiences that I can't find anywhere else. Another big point besides economy and joy and beauty and all of that is that by starting seeds, I get to start my gardening year sooner. I start my seeds 6 to 8 weeks, up to 12 weeks, depending on what it is that I'm starting, before my average last frost date. That means that I'm getting to garden right now in January. My hands are in the soil now starting seeds. They'll be in the soil a lot more next month whenever I start the summer garden and the warm weather things. And I really struggle during late winter with kind of that wintertime blues thing. I really love being outside. I love being in the sunshine. I love being in the garden. I remember years ago, before I was a gardener, really having a hard time in namely January, February, March. But now I can pour myself into seed starting, really get to enjoy that process, and it just gets my hands in the dirt sooner. It allows me to start my gardening year sooner. And I think that we should consider, you know, the mental health aspect and the joy that it gives us and the hobby aspect and validate those things. Definitely starting seeds lets you start gardening sooner rather than waiting until the weather is nice outside. All right, so that's my very brief case for starting seeds. I could talk about that for a really long time. So the first question that I wanted to cover that I get a lot is where to buy seeds. And before I talk about where to spend your money and buy seeds, I want to talk to you about some other options. Gardeners love to share seeds, especially people who save their seeds and have been gardening for a long while. With that being said, I know that there are often seed swaps in communities. Check with libraries, check at your local feed stores if they have message boards. That won't necessarily be chain feed stores, but like you can still go into like farmers co-ops and stuff like that oftentimes and find message boards. Check in any local gardening group Facebook groups and ask if anybody knows about seed swaps. If you cannot find one, I encourage you to start one. Rent a room at the library. Oftentimes those can be acquired for free, and that oftentimes if you're willing to do the legwork of hosting a thing, the library will promote it for you. Just work with your community and see if you can bring gardeners together to swap seeds. But if you are looking to purchase seeds, we can talk about where to buy them. I am of the mind that whatever seeds you can get, grow them. It's fine. There is some misinformation that circulates about seeds being good or valuable or safe, things like that. You will notice every year that big box stores, big box hardware stores, local small businesses, Dollar Tree, Dollar General, lots of places will get a display of seeds. There's a misconception about non-GMO and GMO seeds, and people are afraid that they're going to accidentally buy GMO seeds. And I'll go into further depth on that particular topic a little bit later. But you should just know GMO seeds are not available at a consumer level. You're not going to go into Home Depot and buy those seeds. You're not going to go into Dollar General and buy those seeds. You're not going to go into any website and buy those seeds. That's just not what's happening. People who are buying GMO seeds are buying them on purpose, signing contracts to grow them. They're not at a consumer level, they're at a commercial level. You'll notice when you start seed shopping that a lot of packaging and websites will say, we only sell non-GMO seeds. On one hand, this potentially could be misleading. This could be on purpose, a seed company taking advantage of the fact that people are afraid of that and they want to cater to that. On another hand, perhaps the seed company is just really tired of answering the same question over and over again, so they go ahead and put it on the website. Either way, doesn't matter where you buy your seeds, they're not going to be GMO. With that being said, you can go into any of the stores mentioned and find any seeds and buy them. Oftentimes I will go buy one pack of seeds there. If I need something to fill out a garden space, if I need something right now today, I'll run into one of those stores and get the seeds. The reason why I do not give the majority of my patronage to businesses like that is because I believe we vote with our dollars, and I like to spend my dollars with companies that are owned by people who are doing something great for the gardening community. So instead of giving my money to a corporation, I prefer to give it to a small business where the owner is actually sowing back into the gardening community rather than just taking the money and then building some separate empire. That's not really for me. With that said, I would say the exception to that is that you may not know this, but if you have food benefits like SNAP EBT, you can actually buy seeds with those benefits. Of course, you're going to need to buy them at a store that takes SNAP EBT. And with that being the case, use whatever seeds you can get. It's fine. Dollar Tree, Dollar General, they often get very, very cheap seeds. I have grown many, many packages of those seeds. I had a friend one year, long ago before I had YouTube, bring me a massive box that he got all these packages of seeds for like 10 cents each. And I would say that I grew my garden almost entirely out of that. Just because a seed package is cheap doesn't make it bad, doesn't mean it's not going to grow. But a lot of the packages in those biggest box stores, they're not any cheaper than the online businesses that I'm going to mention that are owned by gardeners and individuals who are sowing into the gardening world. So for me, if it makes no difference, I'm typically going to vote with my dollar in a place that I want to support. But if that's what you can get, if that's what you can access, if you find a deal on seeds, or if you have a gift card, or if you have something like that, totally use what seeds you can get your hands on. Now, I have a handful of businesses that I primarily buy my seeds from. I've bought seeds from countless suppliers. Anytime I find a new seed company, a lot of times I'll place an order, get a handful of packages, just because in the position that I'm in, I like to have the information and find businesses that I like to support. I always feel nervous giving this list because I'm like, I'm gonna leave somebody off that's valid. This is not an exclusive list. I am not saying that anybody that's not on this list is not a good place to buy seeds. I think most places are a good place to buy seeds. I don't want to broadly say this because I know there's a lot of valid sellers on there. Be very cautious purchasing seeds on places like eBay. I would really say don't buy seeds on places like Temu. Any seeds that are going to be coming from foreign countries, there's just not any regulation. And a lot of things on eBay and even on Etsy, though there are some seed sellers on Etsy I absolutely adore, and I know there are seed sellers on eBay that are very legit. But if you see like a vibrant blue sunflower seed available, or some really weird looking thing that you're like, I've never seen that before, just maybe go check and see if that sort of seed is being sold by anybody viable. And before you think, oh, I'm gonna go ahead and get this. I know a lot of people end up getting cheated out of their money from sellers on those kinds of places. So just, if you're going to take the chance of buying from those places, just do a little legwork. Just make sure that you are being an educated consumer. But the businesses that I typically go to, Botanical Interests is a place that I've been buying seeds from for many years. I want to say probably roughly about 15 years I've been buying seeds from them. They were recently acquired by Kevin. He runs Epic Gardening, has made tons and tons of content, and just really put a lot of energy into growing gardeners in the gardening community, and I totally love that. They have fantastic seeds, lots of information on there, really good varieties, and I really appreciate their seed packages because they have so much information. They even have little pictures on them of what the seedling looks like when it first comes up, which eventually, once you've been gardening for a few years, you're going to know that. But as a new gardener, it can be really intimidating when your seedlings start popping up and you're like, oh, is that a weed? Should I pull it? What should I do? So I appreciate that little touch. I do have a link for botanical interest that I'll put below. The next one, Am I Gardener? I love Luke. I love everything that he's doing. And this is an individual who has spent so much time and energy pouring into the gardening community and growing gardeners and connecting with people and providing free resources for them to be able to grow as gardeners. And so I really appreciate that he is providing seeds at a very reasonable price. Most of the packages at My Gardener are $2 each. Really quality seeds. They've always grown very well for me. And so I feel very comfortable recommending Luke. I have a link for his store that I'll put down below. I have shared for years that I adore Wild Boar Farms for tomatoes. Brad Gates has been breeding and developing new varieties of really cool tomatoes for quite a long while now. He's the one person in the world that I've ever fangirled over. When I first met him in 2018, I cried, which was really embarrassing, but I was so excited because I'd been growing his tomatoes for years, and when I met him, I was like, oh, there you are, you're real. So he does incredible work, has a beautiful small business. He and his family do the fulfillment. He's actually out in the field growing these seeds. I'll link him. Hudson Valley Seed Company is another one that I really enjoy buying from. My reason may be silly, but if you're an artist, I think you'll understand. They've done an incredible job creating the most beautiful seed packages you will ever see in your life. They are incredible. They actually wrap them in these cardboard, they're not cardboard, they're like card paper in casings that you can unfold and keep. And they hire different artists to depict the story of these heirlooms. Talk about passionate gardeners. They have incredible stuff. I absolutely adore their company. I've had the joy of meeting the owner a couple of times, and I just have loved everything that I've grown for them. Baker Creek is another one, of course, very well known and has lots and lots of varieties of heirlooms. They've done a lot of work connecting heirlooms with the consumer. Their Seed Expo in California is actually where I met the Hudson Valley Seed Company owner and where I also met Brad and cried. So yeah, definitely, Baker Creek has really great stuff. They also have a fantastic seed catalog. They have a free one and they have a paid one that has tons of gardening information. Buying their seed catalog is worth it no matter where you buy your seeds from, because you will learn so much about different varieties and stories and stuff like that. It's a great wintertime read when you're curled up on the couch. A couple others which I've not shopped from a ton. I have bought some from them, but I know that they're really solid, and it's just I kind of found them later after I already had my preferences and my places that I was used to ordering from. And that's So True Seed. They are local here to me. They're up in Asheville, so a couple hours away. And then Southern Exposure Seed Exchange. And lastly, one website that you absolutely need to know about, again, no matter where you buy your seeds, but they do have a membership. They do preservation efforts, and they have a catalog which can connect you with other people to trade seeds with or to purchase seeds from them, and that is Seed Savers Exchange. So this is a network of gardeners and growers that are saving things, and you can find some very rare wild varieties on there. It's very, very cool. I think that it's awesome, and I would encourage all of you to check that out. I mentioned earlier, like local feed stores, farmers, co-ops. A lot of times those places get bulk seed orders in during this time of year. Not everywhere, and definitely not big chain stores. They've moved over way too much into higher profit margins, but local feed stores will get these, they'll have these bins, and a lot of times they'll have these little brown paper sacks that you can go in and buy seeds by the pound. And And usually it's not everything. A lot of times you're not going to find like pepper seeds or tomato seeds or different things like that. Those are still sold in packages. But beans, corn, peas, any sort of root vegetable like beets, turnips, all that sort of thing. There's a pretty wide selection. Lima beans and different kinds of like black-eyed peas, different things like that. Of course, I'm in the South, and so the varieties are going to change depending on where you are. But if especially you are planting a larger space and you might need multiple packages, instead of paying $15 for 3 seed packs, you could potentially go into a store and purchase by the pound and save a lot of money. Oftentimes people will ask me, does it matter if it's organic or not? That's going to come down to personal preference. I am an organic gardener. I am not certified, but I do garden organically. I do not care if my seeds are certified organic or not. A lot of times you're going to pay a lot more money for that. Growing them organically is enough for me. Now, if you are looking to be a market grower that is seeking organic certification, you will have to buy certified organic seeds in order to get that certifications from the government. But for most of us who are home gardening, that's irrelevant. No matter where you end up getting your seeds, if you don't have a huge space and you don't need a lot of seeds, or say you do have a pretty large space but you're looking to have a lot of variety, instead of buying 25 whole seed packs of tomatoes for yourself because you want to grow 25 varieties, get a few friends to go in with you, because one package of tomato seeds typically has something between like 20 to even 50 seeds. I would say 30 is probably about average, but there's a wide range here. And you're probably not going to grow that many of one type of tomato, especially if you're trying to have a variety and you're having multiple different kinds. So you could very easily go in with a friend and split your seed order, get some little plastic bags. They sell them in the jewelry section at like a craft store at Walmart. You can get like 100 little plastic bags for $1, and you can use those to split up seed packages, to share, to swap. Also, coin envelopes, you can order those or get them at like an office supply store, and they come in multiple different sizes. You can use those to split up seed packages, or of course you can just use like Ziploc baggies. That's a really good way to make the intro into seed buying a little bit more affordable. And you should also know, this is one big tip that I will shout from the mountaintops until the end of my gardening life. Seeds do not expire. We're not talking about yogurt here. We're talking about seeds, which in their natural setting will fall from a plant, literally lay in the dirt, in the freezing dirt for the entire winter and then grow in the spring. I mean, that's what they're designed to do. Seed companies are required to put a sell-by date on their seed packages. This is just to make sure that the consumer is not being taken advantage of and that old seeds aren't being sold, because germination rates can decline, especially if seeds are not stored properly. So you want to keep your seeds cool and dry. I have lots of different ways that I store seeds. My favorite thing is to just have a plastic tote to keep them in. That way if something gets spilled or water somehow gets around them, that they're going to be safe. But they sell these really cool little photo boxes at Michael's craft stores, and usually this time of year, I think they've cottoned on to the fact that gardeners are using these, because I don't know a lot of people who are printing this many photos that they need to just buy these cases so much. So these are like 15 bucks now. Somewhere, I think the other day they were on sale for like 12, but on average they're 20, so somewhere around that range. And these are really great to store seeds in because it can help you organize. I just label my different ones. This is actually the tomato box, so everything in here is tomato seeds. If you have a huge seed collection, you can have multiple of these. If you don't, you could probably fit your whole seed collection in here. Keeps them dry. I like to slide that under a bed. I keep it here in my office in a cabinet. Just somewhere where it's not going to be exposed to direct sun, where it's not going to be exposed to heat. And then of course we definitely don't want the seeds to get wet. When I first got into gardening and I placed my first ever seed order a long time ago, I threw my seeds away at the end, the ones I didn't end up planting that year once the date was hit, because I at that point was so trained to believe that when something gets to that date, it's bad. And that's just not the case. It's not an expiration date. There's nothing wrong with it. If stored properly, they can last you a really long time. All right. Now let's talk about what to buy. I want to address that heirloom GMO hybrid debate. If you've been with me for very long, you've heard me discuss this. I discuss it regularly. I discuss it every year, at least a few times a year. It still comes up weekly. Someone asks me about this, at least this time of year it's a lot more. So I'm just going to keep talking about it because misinformation can lead people away from even trying a thing. And so I want to make sure that people are not being deterred from gardening because they're being crippled by analysis paralysis because of poor information. As I mentioned earlier, you're not going to accidentally buy GMO seeds. You don't have to worry about that. Really, when you are seed shopping, it's going to come down to one of two things, which is a hybrid or an heirloom. There's another term that you need to know called open pollinated. A hybrid is not a bad thing. And right now, though, waters are getting a little muddy when we're looking at labeling because now there's a term being used called bioengineered, and there's an argument being posed that even a hybrid is bioengineered. And the concern has been, and what a lot of the people who are advocating for labeling have been asking for, is that anything that's genetically modified, for instance, with gene splicing in order to withstand large amounts of chemicals to be sprayed on it. And, you know, there's a lot of science experiments that have been happening in food production, and people want to know before they eat those things. And that has spread over into information being circulated in the gardening world because obviously we want to grow food that is pure and healthy for our bodies. What a hybrid is just a cross. It's like one plant cross-pollinates with another. This has been happening since the beginning of time. I like to use the example of dogs because we can wrap our head around that maybe a little bit easier because it's something we're familiar with. So if you have a golden retriever and you cross it to a poodle, you have a golden doodle. The first generation golden doodle, when you have the pure golden retriever and the pure poodle, is that you have a whole litter of puppies that looks more or less the same. You have some different colors, maybe there's a little bit of variation, but they're going to be the similar size dogs. They're going to have similar features. You know what a golden doodle looks like. And if you've ever shopped for any sort of like dog like that, they say F1, which F1 is the first generation of hybridization whenever you make that intentional cross. You can have unintentional crosses, and when you garden, if you start saving seeds, you're going to have unintentional hybrids. I love it. I think that it's awesome. The thing is that whenever you take the golden doodle and you breed it for the second generation, you get a much larger variety in that litter because those genetics, when you're continuing to breed, a lot of the recessive traits are going to come out, and it takes 7 or 8 generations of breeding a plant to get what's called a stabilized hybrid, or it is at that point dubbed open pollinated, which means that it is now a whole new variety that if you cross that pure plant, that open pollinated plant, with another open pollinated plant of the same variety, you're going to get a baby plant that looks just like its parents. The thing with hybrids is, and people will say, well, I need to grow heirlooms because I want to be able to save the seeds. I want to be able to sustain a garden. And this comes up a lot in like prepping and self-sufficiency. People are like, well, you got to grow heirlooms if you want to have a sufficient garden. That's not exactly true, because if it was a survival situation, save seeds from whatever the heck seeds you can get, like from the grocery store tomato, from whatever hybrid plant, whatever you have access to, save seeds from those. Because if you save seeds from a hybrid tomato, you will get a tomato plant. It will grow fruit. It might not be as productive as the plant that you saved the seeds from. It might look nothing like the plant that you saved the seeds from. It might not taste as good as the plant that you saved the seeds from. It'll still be food though. So in a true situation where you need survival and sufficiency, it doesn't matter if it's a hybrid. Now the benefit of hybrids is that they've been bred for certain traits. Now they get a really bad rap because a lot of hybrids have been bred for shelf life and shippability. So whenever we as humans took up the practice of growing food on one side of the world and then shipping it to another, the fact that food spoiled so fast posed a problem. People began developing hybrids for plants that had fruits that stored well, that did not bruise easily, that could be picked unripe and then ripen in transit and then be sold. And that's why your grocery store tomato tastes like disappointment, because it was not bred to taste good for you. It was not bred to be juicy and meaty and full of flavor. It was bred to be shippable, to bring the highest profit margin to the seller. as a home gardener, we get to have different priorities. We get to have priorities that put flavor up on top, productivity. We can have the desire for disease resistance, for pest resistance. And there is some crossover. I mean, a lot of commercial growers are going for those same things, because if you have a disease-resistant variety or a pest-resistant variety, you ultimately are going to have more money because you're going to have more harvest that's sellable. So there are some varieties that commercial growers grow you may want to grow in your home garden. You get to decide what you want to do, but don't shy away from hybrids necessarily just because of the things that you've heard, because they're really not bad. I like certain F1 hybrids for varieties and plants that I typically have a lot of pest pressure on, because there is a thing called hybrid vigor. Mixed breed dogs are often a lot healthier than pure breed dogs, because whenever you are breeding something pure, not only are you exemplifying those classic traits you want, you're also breeding in recessive genes that may be weaknesses. So when you have hybrid vigor, a lot of times your plants are stronger and healthier. Now, hybrid seeds that are F1 crosses are often very expensive. So if you look on like Johnny's Seeds is a place that they have good stuff. They sell to a lot of commercial growers, market growers and stuff like that. And they sell a lot of F1 hybrids. And if you ever shop for hybrids, you may be completely shocked at how much they cost. I mean, I know that on Johnny's there will be like certain kinds of hybrids that are like $18 for a package of seeds. The reason why is that creating those seeds is much more labor intensive, and a human has to go through and directly cross-pollinate those, and they have to be isolated and all these different things, because to get that F1 hybrid, those have to be intentionally crossed, and that's not something that automatically happens. I'll note this. I do it with some hesitation because I don't have a black and white way of how to navigate this. It's something I feel confident, like I listed those seed companies earlier, I feel really good buying from them because from what I understand, they're all sourcing their seeds from growers that they're in relationship with. A lot of times when you're buying hybrids, especially from really big producers, those seeds were created overseas and in places with less regulation, so that the extremely labor-intensive processes can be made cheaper. And unfortunately, that's what happens a lot whenever we demand cheap on a highly labor-intensive process. Somebody is having to work for a lot less somewhere in the world to provide that. So that is one thing about hybrids that is just the truth of that market, and that may be reason enough for somebody to say, I'll only buy from small businesses, I'll only do heirlooms, I'm not going to go into that market at all. Something to consider. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of disclosure about where and how seeds are produced, a lot of times from really big companies, and so it's really hard to nail down how those hybrids came about. There is also a case for being able to say, this is my favorite tomato. I grow this in my garden every single year. I save the seeds for it, and I grow it again, and I look forward to it, and I like it to be the same. For me, my garden has both hybrids and heirlooms because I see benefits of both. Now, heirlooms are all open pollinated because heirlooms are varieties that have been kept pure and handed down for at least 50 years. Some people say 100 years, some people say 75. Really, heirlooms have just been handed down from generation to generation. So I love heirlooms because I love a good story. I love something that's consistent. I really fell in love with gardening by growing heirlooms. And again, as I mentioned earlier, I love to grow things that I couldn't get at the store. The thing is I mentioned Brad Gates earlier and Wild Boar Farms tomatoes. He's growing all these wild new varieties, which he has created by crossbreeding intentionally and finding cool crosses that weren't intentional and then saving seeds from them, and he's stabilized them by saving them and growing them for enough generations that they're considered open pollinated. So Brad's tomatoes are hybrids. They're open pollinated hybrids, and in 50 years when people are growing them, they'll be considered heirlooms. So that's how heirlooms were made. Somebody at some point in time had something show up in their garden, either because they did it on purpose or an accident, and they thought that's really cool, and they started saving seeds for it. And eventually, Aunt Ruby shared her German green tomato with her neighbor, her nephew, her so-and-so, and it passed on over time. But some heirlooms have really, really cool stories. There are varieties that were carried on the Underground Railroad by slaves that were making their way to freedom. There are varieties that were handed down from individuals that were home gardeners. So one of my favorite tomatoes is, I call it Dr. Witchy's because I think I mispronounced it, but he was a Cherokee dentist who partially owned a circus and got very into gardening after he retired and grew tomatoes in elephant manure. And his tomato, Dr. Witchy's Yellow, has been handed down this whole time. And now I get to grow that legacy in my garden, which I love that. And of course, you have some heirlooms that are known for incredible flavor or shelf life or juiciness or meatiness. Like Dr. Witchy's tomatoes has very few seeds in it. It's very meaty. And you have these different traits that are admirable or enjoyable, or you want them, and that's why we keep these varieties alive. As I said, I like a solid mix. There have been times I've really struggled with certain pest pressures or diseases that I looked at hybrids for a solution because I wanted the vigor so that I didn't have to resort to using chemicals in my garden. I would rather use varieties than chemicals. But I would say pretty confidently that probably forever the backbone of my garden is going to be heirlooms, or at least open pollinated hybrids, because I save seeds, so that's something that is important to me. That's a lot of information, and I could keep talking about it and give you more information, but the overall is I really want to remove any sort of confusion or fear of misstep when it comes to buying these things. You can grow a great garden from whatever. I have very vivid memories of being in restaurants with my mom and my aunt and they're eating a salad and they're like, oh, this is a good pepper, and they're fishing the seeds out and putting it in a napkin in their purse so they can go home and grow it. Don't feel nervous that you're gonna get the wrong seeds and mess up. All right, we talked about where to buy, what to buy. All right, varieties. Let's talk a little bit about varieties. I'm not going to go into great detail on varieties on this video because it would be 3 hours long. And while some of you are like, yeah, some of you are like, no, definitely no. So we'll break that up and talk in depth about that in another video. However, I do want to tell you that you should buy what you eat. It's really easy in the pages of a seed catalog to get so inspired by all of the wonderful, unusual things, and then find yourself in July going to the grocery store to buy the produce that you can actually eat while your garden is full of oddities. I struggle with that temptation also. I have a lot of space, so I probably get to grow a little more of the oddities than the average gardener. The main thing I would say is look at what you buy from the grocery store. If you're eating a lot of salads and you're buying store-bought salad ingredients, that needs to go on your what to grow list. If you eat a lot of those little cherry tomatoes that you buy in those blister packs for $5 each, cherry tomatoes definitely need to go on your to grow list. If no one in your house will eat a cucumber or a pickle, maybe rein it back a little bit. It's very easy to be inspired by the beauty of things, the oddity. It's just so inspiring, so it's exciting. But we really do need to consider what we'll actually use. Now, what I like to do is I kind of have my backbone. I have the things that I know we're going to use, that I know I'm going to preserve, and I have a general plan for them. There are so many people that will make you a chart telling you you need 10 tomato plants per person. I will never tell you that information because I don't know you like that. I don't know how your family eats tomatoes. If I were to use 10 tomato plants per person for my house, I've got the majority of my family won't eat a fresh tomato. My son Ben and my daughter Malia and I could literally live on them. We love tomatoes, but everybody eats salsa, everybody eats spaghetti sauce, and I've yet to exactly nail down exactly how many plants to grow because every year is different. I think whenever you come down to how much you should try to grow, that's something that you are going to learn in time. If you're a brand new gardener, you do not need to make an acre garden. You don't know how to garden yet, and it's okay. I know you have the desire to grow your family's food, so you have to go through the process of school. You have to learn how to do it so that one day you can reach that goal, and then leave some room to do the experimenting. I never knew how much I liked radishes until I first roasted them. I didn't realize how much we like beets until we learned that they go great in a salad with burrata or mozzarella cheese. I had no clue that cucumbers would be so prolific. And so my first year with a really big garden we literally were taking 5-gallon buckets of cucumbers to the pigs, and they were turning their snouts up at them because they had eaten so many of them. I didn't know. And so you're gonna learn these things, but I would tell you to start with what you know that you will eat. And if you are planning beyond fresh eating and you're thinking that you want to preserve, look at how you're gonna preserve it and have that plan in place before you put the plants in the ground, so that you don't get carried away and fill your garden with oddities that you have no clue how to use. Now, I will always make an argument when you are planting your garden and you're buying your seeds to make some space for beauty. One, this is very pragmatic in the way of supporting the pollinators and creating a healthy ecosystem. If you're trying to garden organically and you're trying not to spray a bunch of chemical pesticides on your garden, you're going to need to build an ecosystem. There's going to need to be some diversity, because there are beneficial insects that will make your gardening life a whole lot easier if you welcome them and make space for them in your garden. So I really like having companion plants, things like zinnias and borage and marigold. I plant dahlias in my garden. I plant lots of herbs in my garden, some of which, like Thai basil and holy basil, are going to flower, and I mean, that's just how they grow. They bring in a lot of pollinators. Having space for those things, it might seem like you're giving up your practical space, but you're actually helping your practical space be more functional by creating an overall healthy ecosystem. The other thing is that a garden that draws your heart in is not going to be neglected. Some people may be moved by utility, and just having neat little garden rows with just food growing in it may do it for you. I'm not one of them. For me, I need my garden to be something of a refuge. I like to have a chair in it and seating spaces and beautiful flowers and smells that brings in bees and butterflies, and overall that helps the health of my garden, and it also helps the health of me. So I am a huge proponent for growing something lovely. Keep that in mind when you're seed shopping. Throw a pack of zinnias in there, a little bit of tulsi, holy basil, some marigolds, and just overall just let your garden have more color and beauty and draw. The last thing, as far as what to buy, and this is a little bit of a learning curve, and I'm going to give you kind of some basic ways to go about this. You would really benefit from a good grasp of knowing what grows when, most ideally where you live. So I live in the hot and humid South. I live in the Midlands of South Carolina, and every year when I go to the big box stores and I see all the plants sitting out, and the tomatoes and the peppers and the eggplants and all of the things, there will be some started cabbages in with the rest in May. And I know, as an experienced gardener in this area, that none of those cabbages are going to produce a head of cabbage. Not a single one of them. They're being sold sometimes for $5 for a plant, more than a head of cabbage inside the store. And whoever buys them, they're going to go home, they're going to put those in a container in the ground, and it's going to be 85 degrees a week from then, and those things are going to go straight to seed. They don't grow when it's hot. And it's very frustrating to me that corporations will do that, but you don't have to do that. You don't have to make that mistake seed buying. Now, what I would suggest, if you have no clue what grows when, research before you buy seeds, intending them for your spring or summer garden. Now, you can just buy the seeds and use them whenever the time comes. That's also possible. You can buy the seeds and do an experiment, but if you're really going for the most success, say you're going to buy some cabbage seeds, go online and in your search engine put average high and low temperatures by month for your zip code, your closest city, whatever. It'll pull up weather records. You might have to look through a little bit, but you'll be able to find weather records that show, I mean, probably many years of the average high and low for each month in your area. And then you can go search ideal temperatures for growing cabbage, okay? So I can tell you that cabbage in any brassica, kale, cauliflower, broccoli, anything like that, they struggle when it exceeds 85 degrees or 26 degrees Celsius. They're going to start bolting, going to seed. They're not going to taste as good. These things are best grown when it's cool outside, and they can even live when it's freezing at night, you know, as long as it's a mild freeze. So with that being the case, when I'm looking at my average highs and lows, I can look and say, okay, I think these months are the best time for growing cabbages. For me here in the Midlands, it's like January, February, March, maybe into April. By May, it's getting too hot. It's September, October, November. And so that's when I aim to start my seeds and have those things growing. Now this is kind of, I would say, advanced beginner kind of information, so I don't want you to get overwhelmed at all, but I do want you to have those tools to be able to do your own research. There's a fantastic book called Carrots Love Tomatoes, and it's talking all about companion planting and explains the why and all these different things. Very, very fascinating. But when I first got it, I had to laugh, because where I've always lived, gardening in the hot South, you cannot grow carrots and tomatoes at the same time. They're not going to both thrive. They need very, very different conditions. Now, some of you who live in cooler places, more northern places, you can, because it gets hot enough for the tomatoes to grow, but not too hot for the carrots. Where I live, it gets too hot for both by August. So, all of that said, when you are looking and planning your garden, and you are thinking about what you're going to put where, and you're trying to buy seeds, if you buy the seeds and you end up realizing, oh, it's not the right time for these and you need to save them for the fall, that's okay. Like I said, they're not going to expire. It's okay. Just keep them cool and dry. But for the sake of knowing what to buy, especially if you're trying to make your budget work, do that research to find out, does this plant go here? Another thing you could do, just super basic, is are cabbages good in the summer garden? And you'll probably find this information with that search. Sometimes we just don't know how to look for information, and therefore we feel lost, but that's what you need to look for. And lastly, when to buy right now. This is the time of year for seed shopping. You want to get those in, because in most cases you are starting your seeds for the summer garden about 6 to 8 weeks before the summer garden. That's for things like tomatoes and peppers and eggplants, and then things like cucumbers and melons and different things like that. You're going to start those just a few weeks ahead of time. And then a lot of things like beans and squash, we just sow those directly into the ground after the danger of frost has passed. Now, I have all of this information. I wrote a gardening book for brand new gardeners. If you're an experienced gardener, it's probably not going to teach you anything. I'm very poetic, so maybe you'll get inspired in it. It's got pretty pictures of my old garden when I lived in Arkansas. I wrote this book about 4 years ago. But it is available. I'll put a link to it. It's on Amazon. And it has helped a lot of people. And if you're the kind of person that needs a hard copy of information, it covers a lot of what I just talked about, especially with how to do seed starting. And I will be taking you through my process. I have for years. I've got lots of information out there. But again, this year, if you want to follow along with me, make sure that you're subscribed and have notifications on, because I will be sharing with you seed starting, when I'm planting things out, what I'm planting, all the things. And then I will be showing you garden tours throughout the year of how my garden's growing. So I think that's it. I know this is a really long video and a lot of information. Again, if you have anything to add of value, please put it in the comment section down below. If nothing else, maybe a word of encouragement for a new gardener. Thank you guys for hanging out with me today. God bless you. Until next time.